I'll call the meeting to order. Thank you to everybody for being here. Jennifer Baker will be arriving late. She's at the band concert presenting the proclamation on behalf of the town council.
Very cool.
Yes, very cool. She will be here as soon as she can. The first item we have this evening is a discussion item. It's an update on the Fairfax Connector bus service to the Herndon, Reston, Silver Line and the optimization plan. That's the first item on our agenda. There was a public feedback session last week, I think, or a couple weeks ago. And so we are getting our update tonight. So I'll recognize Michael Wallach, our transportation planner.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. Tonight we're joined by three members of the Fairfax Connector. We've got Robin Geiger, Randall White, and Michael Felchow. Michael Felchow has a presentation for us tonight here. He's the planning section chief of the Transit Services Division at Fairfax County Department of Transportation and the project manager on the year-long bus route update that's going on between Herndon and Reston. These are route updates to and changes to coincide with the opening of phase 2 of the Metro Silver Line. And that study is going on right now with implementation for next year.
All right, welcome.
Oh, thank you. Is it on there someplace, I'm assuming?
Take that,
Can I move it?
yeah, you take the mouse over there. There's a wire.
Okay.
I did not pass it along.
Well, I don't stand in front of anybody here, but thank you very much once again. I'm Michael Falchow with Fairfax County Connector. I'm going to go through some slides here rather rapidly. You want to be conscious of your time. If I'm talking too fast, please tell me. I'm a fast talker.
We like
So,
it.
I'll get right to the point with introductions, which we've already done. Project overview, Mike did a really good job of doing that. And then we're going to go over some of the public involvement that we've been doing the last few weeks. So why are we doing this and what are we planning on doing? Obviously, as Mike just mentioned, that we are coinciding this with the phase 2, but we're also taking an opportunity as part of our larger effort of our transit development plan, which is updated every 5 years, to go ahead and start doing that work also. What are we going to get out of it is that we're looking at our system, assessing it, looking for inefficiencies, trying to fix those, and then we'll come up with possibly new routes, adjustments of routes, and then that will be brought out. So we have several alternatives, which I'll show you later on. But first, what's out there today? What's presently there? And when I was back here, I don't know, months ago it seemed, I went through a few of these slides, so these may look familiar to you. Roughly, there's about 32 routes out there. One of them is a WMATA route, that's 5A. We also have we have a commuter route, that's 599, and circulators, locals, and feeders. These are just definitions of how long the route is and how it functions. So most people just see them as their bus routes. So that's more of a transit planner kind of thing. And then there's roughly about 70 buses operating on those routes during peak hour. During off-peak hour, there's significantly less buses, excuse me. So we have multiple facilities. Right now there are the Wheelie Reston facility, the Metro Rail has a park and ride lot included. The Herndon Monroe facility is out there, the Reston Town Center, the North and South Reston park and ride lots are also a part of the facilities that are presently in existence. What we're going to be getting are actually 3 new facilities. Herndon Monroe is one of them. It's now going to just be called Herndon Park and Ride Lot and Metro Rail Facility Innovations. And then, of course, the Reston Town Center Metro Rail Station. And, of course, we already have our existing park and ride lots. So just to give you a frame of reference of the area in which we're studying, so all the routes that go all the way from Highway 7 all the way down to US 50. And of course we have 2 routes that leave this central area of Reston and Herndon. One goes all the way to Tyson's and the other one goes to the Pentagon. So we're following those routes all the way there.
Can I ask a question?
Sure,
I
go
don't
ahead.
wanna like slow this down, but I couldn't help but notice that you only mentioned the south side of the station with the bus route service. Are you looking at access on the town of Herndon side?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll get to that, okay.
We'll
Thank you.
get there.
All right, sorry, I'm like, whoa.
There's 4 bus stops that are gonna be at that location. So
Perfect.
in fact, Randy and I were talking about that earlier this week and last week, so that we
Okay.
were very aware, because you guys mentioned it the last time I was
I
here.
guess that you were, we get a lot of questions about that, so I wanted to
Absolutely.
give you the chance to make that.
Completely understand. Of the planning process, we started it last year with gathering all our data. Little note, there are roughly around 12,000 data points that we collect every day. Just to give you an idea of the amount of data that our buses collect every single day. So, and then we had some public outreach, had some public meetings, we had an online survey, I'll go over that in a little bit. And then we took all that information and started evaluating the routes, and we developed 3 alternatives. There are 3 different alternatives based on the information that we received. And then right now, we're here, right where we are right now, doing some public outreach, getting some input on those 3 alternatives. We'll take all that information back and we'll assess and come back to you, hopefully, and come back to the public early part of next year, possibly right around February, March timeframe, if everything works out right, with a recommendation or preferred plan. Then we'll take some more input, make some tweaks to that, and then sometime in May timeframe of next year, we will actually come back to the Board of Supervisors with a recommendation of what we would like, what we need to implement in order to meet the needs of the community. So, but we've done some research, as I mentioned. Our communications and marketing department did a marketing survey. This was for people who ride the buses, people who no longer ride the buses, and people who never rode the buses. Over 2,500 people were contacted, and we got some pretty interesting information. One of the key things that people wanted were faster routes, more reliability, greater span of service. And it has to go where I need it to go. Pretty crucial bits of information. Yes, ma'am.
Just, you said you sent out 2,500 pieces of, requested 2,500 people get back to you.
We contacted 2,500 people. I believe it was through the telephone, correct?
Right.
It was
Okay, so
over
you
the
actually spoke to 2,500 people.
Yes.
Thanks.
Not me personally. but
They were
it's all-
spoken to.
That would take a lot of my time.
I know, I just
So-
wanted to check.
But good question, good clarification. Then we did an onboard survey for all the routes across the entire county. And that was right around 2,500, 2,600 people we interviewed on all the routes. So, and we got very similar information. They needed service that was more frequent, greater span of service, and they wanted more express service that got faster travel. So very similar information between those people who don't use transit and those people who are actually using transit today. We also, as part of the onboard survey, we tracked where people are getting on and off. Our buses do track on and offs, but we can't connect the dots because the bus doesn't know who's getting on and who's getting off, but we do know where everyone's getting on and off. So we were able to, as part of the survey, we asked them where where their origin and where their destination was. And so what we have here is a heat map. You can see in the origin is basically Herndon Reston, but where they're going is Herndon Reston. It was very interesting. About 70% of the people who are using the transit system up here are staying right around this area, or they're staying on our routes, as you can tell. Also, Tyson's is in there, Washington D.C., and the airport is that little dot there. Yes.
Factor transfers from the Silver Line?
Because
Because
I'm going to get to that.
take the 950 to the Silver Line.
We'll get to that
Okay.
in one moment. Yes, ma'am.
Are you taking into account that there may be limited routes that they can take?
Yes.
In other words, you know, there at least was a time when you couldn't get to Chantilly from Herndon on the bus, so I don't.
So, yeah.
Still
Yeah.
can't.
Nope.
But this is only based on those existing routes that are out there today and what people are doing on those routes.
So it's
And
not
this is
predictive
very,
what people
this
want.
this is just a heat map. It doesn't take into every single trip that was ever taken. So, but I believe you had a question, it was about, the Metro Rail.
Transfer, yeah.
That's only 30% of the people who use the routes up here.
Okay.
So that's significantly different than it was many years ago. So we have a lot more, we have a different market that is now using our transit system than we've had in the past.
Yes.
So, what we learned was connectivity, and what we did about that was try to realign routes to quicken and make improved travel patterns, faster travel. So we came up with alternatives that adjusted routes to make them more direct and reduce unneeded travel patterns. We increased span of service. This was identifying possible corridors where we could improve service along there by expanding service hours, and then increase frequency on key corridors by improving the number of buses on a particular route. Now, these are different alternatives. You'll see that in a moment. So we developed 3 alternatives. The first alternative took what was in our existing transit development plan and said, let's make modifications to that and see what we can get based on what our input was. The second alternative said, let's streamline things a little bit, concentrate on key corridors, concentrate on key locations, and concentrate on maximum service. Now, alternative 3 said, well, let's start all over again. Just a clean sheet of paper, let's see if we can do it better than what we have out there today. All these were basically budget neutral. We added one alternative that had a lot of more hours of resources. It wouldn't match up, and we couldn't make a fair comparison. So they're all within 1 to 2% of what we call revenue hours of operation. The preferred plan, which we are not there yet, so you're only going to see the alternatives today and some of the scoring that went into those alternatives. The preferred plan may be a combination or a hybrid of the 3 you're about to see. So we'll pick and choose. I call it a la carte planning. You take a route from this alternative, a route from that alternative, and you create a new one based on input. These 3 alternatives give you a gauge of alternatives. Do you want a little bit more of this or a little less of that? So it's a choice. And then we're also looking at an alternative transit study that's county-wide. It was a part of our transit development plan, which might include microtransit, which are more flexible route structures. And this will all go into the transit development plan once that's completed. There were a couple of concerns that we got from when we were here last time, and many of them were right there out there in the hallway, was the senior home, Harbor House. We needed a connection between that location and the shopping center along the core of the community. So you'll see that in alternative 2. Well, there's also the concern of linking the downtown area to the north side of the Metro Rail station that's going to be built with those 4 bus stops. That is in alternative 1. That's exactly from the TDP plopped right into this alternative. We also found other connections in alternative 3, and so you have along Herndon Parkway there's connections. We've improved some of those, and then we have connections in alternative 1 and 3 between downtown and other portions of the region. So alternative 1. Now this has the 921, which is the circulator route that you were looking for. Most of the routes are very similar to the current system. Most of the routes still go to Wheelie, so they're not spread and rebalanced across the corridor. Some are, but most of them still go to Wheelie. It is based on the transit development plan, and the RIBS routes are unchanged. So that gives you a highlight of what this is. And this is all online, so you can go and look at it individually. It improves some connections, Centerville, Chantilly, and Bear Lakes. And when we talked about that scoring, those key areas I mentioned earlier, this improves connectivity. And it had some difficulty trying to get the other key areas.
Can I ask, is 921 in use now, or is that a
That doesn't
plan for the
exist.
future? Okay, thanks.
938, 950 are basically the ones that are inherited right now.
Yeah. So alternative 2 is a streamline concept. It simplifies our routes. it tries to reorientate the services to the other Metro rail lines, so we don't have a lot of redundancies. It improves some frequencies in the core of the community, and so there's some changes on the RIBS routes. There's also new connections to Sterling, Plaza, the Community College, Chantilly, Bear Lakes, and GMU. And these little circles down here is that it improved connectivity and span of service. Alternative 3, that's the transformation one, starting all over from scratch. We have all-day service. We're able to, there's a lot more distribution of the routes at the Metro rail stations. This was based off of what I call a hybrid grid that you could transfer almost anywhere at any point. You don't have to go to those hubs, but that's where they do end up. The RIBS routes were unchanged, and we had improved in connections to Sterling, Centerville, and George Mason University. And this one did pretty good in connectivity, travel time, and frequency. So this is the data this is some of the data that went into a high level review of some of the information. The transit propensity population, do not try to say that 10 times fast. That is basically an analysis of the people that typically use transit. These are your youth, your seniors, your low income, your households with 1 or 0 vehicles. And what we try to do is identify those households index from the US Census within a quarter mile of the route of each one of these alternatives. So right now there's about 76,000 people along the existing routes within a quarter mile. Alternative 1, we increased that to 93,000. Alternative 2 and Alternative 3 are both in the mid to high 88,000s. Frequency and span of service. This gets a little transit wonky, if I may say. Frequency was that each route was given a score between 0 and 2.5 on whether or not level of frequency. 15 minutes or better, that's really good. It got the highest score. And during peak hour, if it was below, let's say 60 minutes or 45 minutes, it got a 0. And then we took all those routes and we averaged them up and we got an index. So these are an index. Right now, you're right now right below 1. You want to probably be around 1.25 based on this index. The only alternative that actually moved the bar was Alternative 3. It actually got you, in your community, better frequency. Span of service, same kind of concept. We scored all the routes in each alternative between 0 and 2.5 based on whether it had all-day service, Saturday service, Sunday service, that kind of thing. And as you can see, right now we're at we're a little under 2. The only alternative that was able to move the bar, because remember these alternatives are shifting resources from one aspect to another aspect, so you can't get everything you want. So Alternative 2 did the best in terms of span of service. Yes, sir.
Just so I can triangulate, when you're looking at factors, is there a baseline for that? For example, like a Sharpe ratio looking at an investment, a
No.
Sharpe ratio of 1, and then if there's an excess return relative to the transportation population? Okay, it's just,
We didn't do that.
they're static? Okay.
They're static.
Just making
We
sure.
didn't shift anything.
Okay,
It makes it
I got it.
too
Yep.
complex.
Got it.
This was hard enough.
Just trying to-
Stop. Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay, travel time. This was based on the origin and destination of the onboard survey. We identified the top O&D, origin and destination patterns, the top 10, and then we basically drove a trip through the network on those 10 and took an average. And that included whether or not those origin and destinations needed to go on WMATA or on another bus or our system, or how far they had to walk. If they had to transfer, there was a penalty. And you can see right now it takes an average of those 10 key travel patterns, 66 minutes. These 3 alternatives did better with Alternative 3, doing the best at 46 minutes. Key locations, these include high schools, colleges, hospitals, metro rail stations, park and ride lot, major employment centers, and activity centers like shopping. Right now there's about 57 of them, as we've identified, quarter mile off each route within a network. Each one of the alternatives were able to do it a little bit better, and that's because they're trying to reach Centerville, Chantilly, they're trying to get to GMU, and so they're able to make a larger link to outside the region, to a more greater area. So you're able to get that. Now, this is where it gets a little more techy. We use these 5 criteria. 2 of them are used as weights. That is the frequency and span of service against the other 3. So transit propensity, travel time, and key locations. The 2 that are weights, which are frequency and span of service, were used against transit propensity and key location. Travel time was not used and was not given a weight, simply because once you're on a bus, you don't really care about the bus behind you or the bus in front of you. You care about the travel time between point A to point 10. We didn't want to expand that or decrease it. As you can see from the spiderweb graphic, alternative 3, which is the purple line, does the best in terms of frequency and travel time savings as compared to the existing. So when we scored everything, what we came out with was alternative 3 does the best with those categories. It does. Now, one thing I really want to make sure everyone is aware of, this does not mean we're recommending alternative 3. It just scored the best. What we want to make sure is that this is a quantitative and qualitative approach. We're in the qualitative process now, gathering input. And so we may take, with working with our community and with stakeholders, which of course you're on one of our stakeholder groups, is we may take elements of 3 and then put it into a preferred plan. So there might be elements in alternative 1 and alternative 2 that we have to have because the qualitative approach says that's the best thing to do. So you just can't play it by the numbers. And I've been thinking about this for a while, and say, these are what I would call 30% design. You would never put these on the street the way they are today. So it's just there is a sensitivity test.
Question.
So, go ahead.
By the way, you had me at transformation for number 3. The transit propensity population number, where did that come from for each of the scenarios?
That's a U.S. Census data.
From 2010?
It would be 2010, but you got to remember every 2 years the U.S. Census does the American Household Survey, and so they update that data and we grab it off of there.
So what was the sort of, can we capture sort of the diversity of that population in that segment for scenario 3? The reason I'm asking is I think certain groups tend to be in certain socioeconomic levels with propensity to use mass transit. So I'm just curious what that number looked like.
If I think I understand your question, you're asking who's included
Yes.
in that category.
Yes.
I mentioned earlier that you had the youth, the seniors, the
Okay, double click on that number.
Okay.
Right, Fairfax County is very diverse. So is there that type of data?
well, we brought that down to a geographical level within your area. It wasn't just all of it. It was brought down to the census block groups within Herndon and Reston. So we're looking at that area. We're not looking at the whole county.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
When you're looking at bus rides, are you hoping to appeal to somebody who just doesn't ever plan to get a car? Because what I'm thinking about is we're planning for a future where people use the bus and mass transit as their sole way of getting to any place. And if we're just looking at it in the traditional way, which is sort of commuters who are going into DC or people just getting around in their local area, that's not very transformational, and I'm not sure which which group of people you're trying to appeal with the transformation.
I had a very similar question at one of the public meetings, and I've been doing this over 20 years. The first thing I try to do is make sure that I serve individuals who have no choice. That's number 1. Second, I attempt to get you to your place of work regardless of your income. Third, I try to reduce congestion in key corridors. So that's typically what I do. In alternative 3, if you may remember, I said it's a hybrid grid. It's not focused on just getting you to the Metro Rail, it's focused on getting you, I called it, and I explained it to my daughter, crisscross applesauce. If you're up here and you wanna get down here, there's a route that takes you there. If you're here, you wanna get here, there's a route that takes you there. If you wanna get from here to here, you can do that. It's crisscross applesauce. So it's a hybrid grid system, and that's why it had more direct routes from point A to point B across the area, and that's why it got a 46 in travel time, because people didn't have to take a penalty, didn't have to go all the way over to Wheelie to transfer, to go all the way back, because they were on the south side and they want to get to the north side, and they really can't do that, or they have to take the 950 all the way around.
Yeah.
That's, see, it tried to do that. What it doesn't do very well is because it's trying to do that, there became gaps. There were areas that weren't served, that the other two served better. So you have to, once again, take the good with the bad, and that's where we are right now, trying to get input from you and the community, so we can take that and fill in those gaps. That's why I said alternative 3 is not ready for prime time. I would never put that on the street right now. There's a lot more evaluation that needs to be done. And when I was telling another community, hopefully they heard me, as I said, where we're going with this is that everyone who takes the bus today, we want them to be able to take the bus tomorrow. And one of the tests we'll do with the preferred system, which we have not developed yet, as of yet, is that we know where everyone's getting on and off the buses. So we have that mapped out, and we're gonna take the system that we end up with and make sure that everybody is within a quarter mile. And we're gonna, not quarter mile of a bus stop, because many of our bus stops people don't use. So the unutilized ones, we're gonna throw those out, but the ones that are utilized, we're gonna see. And if we can get up to 100 on our preferred plan, that means everybody, those key people who are using our transit system today, can use it. And then we look at it in terms of within a 45-minute travel time, what is the employment and population within that 45-minute buffer? And that's to your question about, can we get more people onto the transit system, reducing congestion and making livability within our community? Those are the 2 more tests that we're gonna put whatever we come up with through. We're gonna put that through those scrutiny, and if they achieve that, then we're gonna bring that out to the public and say, yes, we can do that. We're actually just talking to Northern Virginia Transportation Commission, and we're saying, can you guys give us this data? Can you generate a model that gives us this watershed of 45 minutes? And they said yes. So keep your fingers crossed that they actually come through and we get the number we need to show the benefit. And that's showing the benefit and the justification of where we need to go and making sure that it meets the needs of the community.
Thanks.
So, good questions. So we have the 3 alternatives, and we're out to the public. So we've had some public meetings. We had 3 public meetings already. About 30 people came to those public meetings, but we have an online survey that shows all these maps and all this information. It is a little on the techie side, unfortunately. We're going to see if we can ever maybe improve that in the future. But we've gotten well over several hundred people have already gone into that survey and have made comments. I haven't pulled down all the data yet because it's still open, so there's nothing to assess at this time, but people are on there. And so I look at it as, since it's not statistically based, it's like several hundred people coming to public meetings and giving us their input. So we're going to go through all the comments, make sure we get all the information that we need. We're going to take all that information, and as I said, going to develop the preferred plan, bring that back to the public. And if you need more information, you can go on FairfaxCountyConnector.com to find the survey. Has it been moved to the buttons? Moved to the front page now?
It's on the front page, but it's FairfaxConnector.com. FairfaxConnector.com or
I put County.
FairfaxCounty.gov.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's right up there.
Yeah, I talk a little fast sometimes. Questions and discussion.
I just think, sorry,
Okay, no, go.
I do think it's important, going to what Mr. Douglas said, because I've actually taken the bus for 2 straight months for work. I was doing kind of an ad hoc, view, and there's definitely, for example, a 950 bus, I can tell you at any time during the day, there were definite stops where it has high traffic along Eldon Street, along Alabama.
Mhm.
And there's parts where it just doesn't. So I think that would, you know, if there's ways that, I get that. And the other thing too is with the advent of the Herndon metro station coming, you know, how will the 950 morph? Because that goes to the backside of the Herndon station, and then, which will become the Herndon, you know, the Herndon station, and then continue on to Wheelie, which is the last stop. I mean, it's just from there to there. So I do think that factoring in, you have to consider what's gonna happen with that station being there, because that final leg of the 950 would be irrelevant, because it's not gonna be needed, because it's gonna be in that station.
That's all good information, so we'll be looking at that.
And also, that 950 is a lifeblood for many people, and also 938, because people work 3 shifts, and I know for a fact, I used to live in a section of Fairfax County where the Fairfax connector would come Monday through Friday until 5 PM, and then nothing on weekends. But the 950 goes past my house 24 hours a day, and I know it's a lifeblood, because it makes me feel good when I hear beep, beep, beep at 2 o'clock in the morning, because someone is
Yeah.
coming home from work and being productive. So I think that needs to be considered.
And 950 is in your area of the county, is the highest production route that we have.
It's huge.
It has the highest ridership, so it's crucial, and as you said, it is the lifeblood of the route. So we want to make sure that whatever we end up with, a version of 950 exists, because if we
Yeah.
take that away, I think we're going to hear about it.
Oh, yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes.
Are
So
you also
that's all
taking
good.
into account that people, oh, I'm
Go
sorry, you
ahead.
wanted to.
No, go.
That people now work, you know, Saturdays and Sundays, so instead of just needing a 9 to 5, you know, 6 AM to 9 and 5 to 7 or whatever it is, I mean, work has just expanded. So are weekends as well
Yes,
served?
and when you look at, when I talked about the span of service factor, the routes and the systems with the highest, the alternatives with the highest score were got routes that were not just peak hour service, they were off-peak, they were late evening, they were weekend. So if you got all those, that route got a 2.5 in its score, and that pushed the average up. So that's, yes, and that's, I believe it was, alternative 2 did the best on that, if I can remember correctly.
So to add on to what Sydney just said, I had a question about why there is so little weekend service in all of the options that go to the metro station. It looks like, I mean, I understand that metro, we think commuting, but as Sydney said, commuting is happening all the time, and we are trying to attract people to our downtown to go to events. We have an art center that's coming, there's gonna be, you know, theater events and art gallery and all those sorts of things, and that's not happening Monday to Friday
And we
during
don't
business
have
hours.
And we have people who live in the town that work on weekends that take the 4 o'clock in the morning, say, work at a bakery or something, yeah.
Typically, you're right, and the typical transit agencies, there's less service on the weekends, unfortunately. There's only a couple of transit agencies that I know of, that actually have the same level of transit service on the weekend as they have on the weekday. And, it's usually very, very large metropolitan areas like New York City and stuff like that. There is one in the Rockies, it's Breckenridge. They got great service on the weekends, it's 24-hour service. It's for skiers, but it actually isn't for skiers. I did the work up there, and it's actually for all the workers
Workers.
trying to get
Yeah.
to the hotels
They have to
to
serve.
do all the work.
Absolutely.
So it's a different market, so, but I think we need to take a look at that. Everything's on the table, and also there was a couple of comments I received in other public meetings about, well, what happens after you implement this? Do you gonna look at it again?
Yeah, how flexible are you?
And
Right.
the answer is yes.
That was my question.
After 6 months, we're gonna evaluate from day 1 for 6 months, and then we're gonna say, okay, what needs to be adjusted? And then we're gonna do it for the next, 6 months to the next 18 months. Look at it again. What needs to be tweaked? Because we're not gonna get it perfect day 1. Some things might need to be tweaked, and we'll change that. And then, every 5 years, we're gonna come back to the system. This happens, we've cut the county into 5 pieces. You're in 1 piece. And so in 5 years from now, we'll come back and we'll do the same thing, just scrape it all off, test it all over again, see what works, see what doesn't work, because people change work, they change locations, they move, they do things differently, and we need to constantly change. There's transit systems I've worked out there, they haven't moved in 20 years, and they wonder why their ridership went out. Well, because they don't live there anymore, they live over there.
Well, I think it's, we have an opportunity here to be transformative, and I think it's, and I understand budget, like, we can't just have buses and, you know, running amok all the
Yeah.
time, we've gotta be reasonable. But, I mean, we are right next to an international airport, that we're trying to get people off of our streets and onto the metro to get there. The population who lives here, we've already talked about the diversity and the types of work and, the lack of cars for a lot of our families. And finally, I'm sure that you guys are aware of it, but I just wanna reiterate that the town of Herndon is more densely populated than most of the county. And so, we aren't New York City, but I think that we should take that into account, especially with the diverse population we have here. We wanna be able to serve everybody.
Absolutely.
And the town council is more than willing to come and make noise if you need help to look at something that might not look conventional, because we're ready to fight for it.
We're dense.
With you.
One of the things
Until we're
that
dense.
Supervisor Faust said at the last Board Transportation Committee meeting that I was at, where I was introducing this information, he asked about, well, what are you doing beyond just the status quo of the budget neutral? What we're gonna be doing is we're gonna come up with a preferred plan, but then what we'll also do at the same time is a preferred plan plus. So if maybe it doesn't fit in that little box, and maybe there's an opportunity to add more on, more span of service, more weekend service, more frequency, and then we can see where we can take it. If we bring that to the board and there's resources, then it happens. But at least if we don't get it around at this time, we can put it in the transit development plan and we can look for resources in the future. As long as it's in there, then we can keep moving towards it.
Sydney.
I just have one last question. I went to one of the economic development meetings that Supervisor Faust holds, and they were talking about autonomous vehicles, and the reason I bring this up is that the autonomous vehicles that they're using in Reston right now, I believe, and they're planning to use even more, some of them have software on them that can tell where people, in others, they're going all over the place, they're that last mile, and they can tell where people are stopping, and they can map it. So they'll know where people wanna go, but we're not doing that in Herndon, and I think that was a private enterprise that was doing it. But is that something that you all can
Well,
use or are
I'm
using?
not 100% sure what in terms of mapping, but our buses count every person that's coming on. We have what's known as APCs, automatic passenger counters, and they count as they get off, and we geocode that. So we know
Yeah.
exactly where they're getting off and on throughout the entire system 24/7.
But with
So-
the autonomous vehicles, they're going wherever these people wanna go, they're not stuck on routes,
Well,
so
yeah.
that's
So-
why I was asking, cause that can give you a little more information that you might not
The
get from the buses.
alternative transit study that I mentioned earlier, that's what that's looking into. See, and also on top of that, the county is working with Dominion Electric down in Mosaic to put an alternative vehicle, one of these autonomous vehicles in. In fact, I had a conference call today about it. So we're looking at actually a pilot program, and I know there's gonna be one up in Reston too, to look about how this is gonna do. Now, the one I believe in Reston is gonna be more of an internal to a campus, while the one we're gonna be doing is gonna be on the road, on a public road, crossing a VDOT intersection, so, at 45 miles an hour intersection, so that's gonna be interesting. So, so we're gonna learn a lot from that, and then maybe we can move that into our toolbox of services in the future.
Pradeep and Sheila and Cesar, have you had a chance, or do you have a comment before we?
Yeah,
give
I
other
just
people
have a comment, I
chance?
don't really have questions, but what I'm hearing is this is gauged towards trying to get people off the road. We are looking at the people that really depend on this type of transportation, as well as they don't wanna be in a car, period. And it's for the workforce more than the people skiing or going to parties, and, I mean, because if you're looking at people with large disposable income, they're going to be taking their taxis and so forth. So we're trying to get the masses to and from where they're going. So this is not necessarily just for Friday Night Live.
No, typically, as I said earlier, what we start with are the individuals who have no choice. They
Okay.
need to get to work, to stay vital into the economy, looking for the senior citizen who wants to stay vital. We're looking for the youth who have to go to work, go to school, gotta go to a baseball game, that kind of thing. That's the start.
Right.
And then we add in the next layer, the people who make a choice, we call them choice riders, who wanna make a choice because they already have a car, but they wanna take a bus. Then we look for then there's the next level is the person who says, you know what, too much congestion on the road, I wanna do it, or that person who gives up that car. So there's tiers that we look at and we try to capture, but for each one of those, there's a different level of intensity of transit service that you wanna do. And we like to say in our department, all, the tide rises all boats. So as we make a better system, it makes everyone in the community better. So we don't make a system that says, well, you're low income, so this is your route, you're high income, this is your route. No, we make a route, and that route serves all people regardless.
Right, but it's just not gonna be everything for everybody. It's,
And you know, there's only so much we can do.
right.
Cesar?
Just an idea, as a thought. I think more data is better, I think. So if there was some way to capture someone volunteering either through an app or a profile of attributes, I'm this age, demographic, job, or whatever, if they have that technology on their phone, to, as a volunteer, sort of help capture some of that information, you know, where they actually come from, where they get on time. I mean, I don't think you're capturing that level of detail.
On the onboard survey, we did.
Well, but it's at that time, right? You're not tracking.
Or we don't do it every day.
Right. And I think that the more you can capture, again, this would be a volunteer, maybe you have an app that you can turn on some of these trackings. By the way, you have to turn it off now with the new upgrades, right? You say, don't track me, sort of thing. So I'm just wondering if that's something that you could possibly leverage.
I'm sure we can look into that kind of technology. All technology has a price, so we can always look into it.
Bill?
Just two things I wanna, cause I worked, thank you for two things, the 9:38 bus, when we changed the routes for the schools, just by adjusting those a few minutes, what that's done for kids to get to work and where they need to go. You know, I know that ridership has gone up on that, so thank you for that. That has meant the world to a lot of kids who need to work, so thanks for that. And the other thing I wanna thank you is for keeping the bus station, you know, the bus depot in Herndon, because I know that moving forward, that will be a big asset to us in regards to micro routes and things of that nature. So thank you for doing that as well. So I want to just thank you and just appreciate it. So your work is definitely appreciated on that stuff.
I wanted to just ask, inquire about the circulator route. Is that 921? Is that what you're
921,
looking at?
yes.
And we didn't get into a lot of detail on that tonight, I don't think, unless I spaced it. But I know we've been working for years, trying to make that circulator piece to and from the metro, for the residents in the town. So is there more coming on that, or?
It's in one of the alternatives. It is in there. What we're gonna do now is we're going to evaluate all the routes and the individual alternatives based on the input that we get. As I said, alternative 3 did the best as a system, but there's still weak points within it. And so one of the things that we will be looking at is 921 and seeing how we can fit it, if it does fit, and start analyzing it within the within all the other services. So that's what we're looking at right now. In fact, I printed off 921 out of the TDP and said, okay, you know, what do we got here? How can we get it to work within alternative 3? If that's alternative 3 is where we're going to move towards, or if there's some other combination. So it's not off the table, it's still there. The question is, how do we get it in to make it work?
Well, I know that it's really critical to this council and the people who live here, especially with our with our dense population. Sorry, it's like a running joke that we're dense.
It's not off the
Bad
table.
choice of
We're heavily looking at it. In fact, I was just talking to my staff the last couple of days and saying, okay, so how do we make this work? And so we're looking at it and we're assessing it right
Because it
now.
worries me that you're saying, well, it's not off the table, because that kind of sounds like yet. So if there's anything that we can do to help facilitate that, it's been a major piece of our transportation plan from ever since Sheila and I have been on council, which is longer than we'd like to admit at this point. But
I
it's
will
really
take,
important
we will
to
take
us.
we're gonna take a hard look at it. And we can work with your team and your staff. In fact, I think we have a meeting set up where we're gonna talk about these things exactly and how we can make sure that these things make it in. And we're talking to a bunch of other agencies and seeing how we can make all this stuff fit. And
So, again, that process you'll present to the board of supervisors?
well, we'll come back again.
Okay.
Hopefully, we'll probably come back to you, Reston Association, public meetings again in the February, March timeframe, and show you the preferred plan, not the recommended plan, but the preferred plan, and we'll go through more detail and saying, okay, here are the routes in your area that are the most important and work for you. And then we start making some tweaks. If 921 isn't in there, I'm sure you're gonna let me know about it.
It's not optional, really.
So we're gonna work real hard to see how we can get everything that you need in there, and still meet the needs of the community and meet within the budget confines of the resources that we have. But once again, we can also put in things for the future. So maybe we put 921 in, but we take something else off the table and we put that into the future, and that's how we can get things going. It all doesn't all. We're doing this same study in Franconia. In Franconia, we can phase that over time. Unfortunately, we can't do that with this one because I have to flip the switch. The day the Metro Rail runs, we have to have a system that functions better for the community with that one. So unfortunately, we can't. If 921 doesn't fit in there right, we gotta find a way to fit it in. It might change its structure a little bit. I think, Randy, you were talking about making it bi-directional earlier today.
That's
So-
the way it's proposed in the TDP, is a 921 and 922.
Yeah, the two routes that are there. 921 is just counterclockwise, I believe. So, yeah, it says counterclockwise all day. So those are the kinds of things we have to look at, and how do we get it to fit.
I just wanted to mention too, that I'm leaving a bag of postcards with free light coupons for you to distribute. And it talks about the community meetings that we've already held, but it also has the survey information, which goes through November 30th. So,
Great, thank you.
It's a great stocking stuff.
Great stockings.
No, it'll
We're a
get
big
you
Any
ready.
other
We
comments
celebrate
or
Christmas every day.
questions from the council?
No, I'm looking forward to seeing the advance,
Yeah, that was great.
impressed bus service. I have one son that would never get on a bus, and another son that was all over this area when he was in middle school and high school, using a bus. And with him, we go to another city, and he's all over the buses. The other son, he doesn't want to get on the bus. He's got bus aversion. So I know that a lot of people are still gonna have that.
Yeah.
I think it's an advantage.
Well, and while we just have your ear, thank you to whoever made the free bus rides for middle and high school students. That is
Yes.
something that should never go away as long as we can afford it,
Agreed.
because that has made a huge difference.
We're trying to fill the donut hole, which is
Yes.
a little bit younger, because under 12 ride free too, so
Right.
anyway, that's something.
Thank you, I just want to throw that out there while you're here.
The ridership is actually going up
Good.
on the connector just a little bit, and a lot of it is due to the students. I think it's about 5%, 5 to 6% of total ridership right now.
Awesome. Well, people start their patterns on day one at Metro, so I know you want to get that correct. And if we get our kids using transit early, they're going to use it more as adults, I think, so. Cindy, you want to close this up?
I just wanted to thank you all. I have always been impressed really with the Fairfax County Connector, because I was downtown on 9/11. I had parked my car at the West Falls Church, and no, not at West Falls Church, at the Herndon Monroe parking ride, and I didn't know how I was gonna get there because everything shut down. And the Metro got us to the park and ride, and there were buses waiting, and they were just moving us on. I have never seen anything like it. That was very impressive. So I know it's been a long time, but I've always been very impressed with you guys. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, and thank you.
Great work.
Thank you for the purple box too, the purple glass.
Oh, we are so excited to have ours.
I have the email.
Yeah,
Thank you
too.
guys,
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Great work.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so next week we have, I think, just one presentation, which is Pearl Harbor Remembrance Day that we do every year. Then moving to our public hearings. So next week's public hearing will follow the bid process and take action by roll call. For the next two items, all bids received will be entered into the record. The first one is an ordinance to grant a 10-year telecommunications franchise to AT&T Communications of Virginia LLC. And I'll recognize Tammy Chastain.
Good evening.
Good evening.
This is a 10-year telecommunications franchise for AT&T. This is actually a combination of combining two franchises that expired. One is AT&T Communications of Virginia, and the other is American Telephone and Telegraph Company of Virginia. So there's no change to their routes or anything. It's simply a franchise because the other one's expired.
So it's just renewing a franchise.
Essentially, but not really.
But they need a new one because the other one expired.
Yeah.
Questions?
Absolutely.
The next one is to grant a 10-year telecommunications franchise to Teleport Communications America LLC. Turn it back to Tammy.
All right, good evening. It is, this is exactly the same thing. The other one expired. There are no changes to their route. Another 10-year agreement.
Is that all you got?
That's all I
She's making it
got.
sound really simple, but it was a lot of work for staff and the providers.
Of course it is. You gotta do mapping.
Quite
So
a bit.
there's no digging, it's all.
Nope, it's
It's
all
just
there. And
new stuff. No new
No
stuff.
new stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
Can I just pause for a second? This is Tammy in the worst snowstorm, the worst windstorm. I see her, she's always the same.
And that's a good
The
thing.
calm in the storm.
That's it, she's the calm in the storm.
Any questions or comments for staff on this one? Thank you all for all of the legwork that goes on behind this. We will see you next week. I will be anticipating a boatload of bids coming in.
Oh, there you go.
Okay, thank you. The next item is an ordinance to approve a lease of space in Town Hall, or in Town's building at 397 Herndon Parkway to the Fairfax County Board of Supervisors. The town attorney provided council a corrected lease. There was a typo in it. And she will outline the revisions for us tonight. You should have a paper copy of the revised lease, I believe.
It's one word, changing rehearsal, which was in there from the last lease we did, to office space.
But what if they want to do rehearsals? Are they not allowed?
I think that Jenny Phipps is not gonna have any choice about being involved with the rehearsals, or at least listening to them. Previously Supervisor Faust's assistant, Jenny Phipps, had space in Town Hall, towards the back door of Town Hall. With the hiring of a risk manager, who will be starting December 2nd, there was need to have that office space because that individual is under the supervision of the town attorney. And it is one of the few office spaces that was available for them. Luckily, Supervisor Faust and Jenny were both on board with that and agreed to terminate the current lease they have, get a new lease for space in 397, and she has chosen a space over there in that building and is looking forward to it. It has a one-year term at this point, expires on November 11th, 2020. It's for $1 a year, which was the previous rent for town hall space. Any questions?
Questions, anybody?
Everything's just moving over there, which is, I mean, it's all the government stuff, so it's kind of making sense.
It
State
does
and
make
local.
sense. And the state senator asked me if she would be moving over there as well, and I told her that possibly, we don't need the space that she's in at this time like we did the
Right.
space on the first floor, but she likes the idea of a government kind of,
Yeah.
I don't know, annex with all of the local government, so I would guess that would happen eventually.
And
Along-
it's
along-
ADA accessible over
Right.
there, whereas
Yeah.
it's not
Right.
in Old Town Hall,
Yeah.
on the second floor.
And
It's
along a
nicer
connector
space.
route.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That's
All right, any other questions? Cesar?
So, I'm totally on board with this. I have a question kind of related to it, but we do this practice where we charge $1, right? And that's fine, we're consistent with that, but why wouldn't we look at a market rate and do an in-kind contribution instead?
That's certainly something that could be done. That decision isn't up to me. And previously.
But it's legal.
Right, right. Previously, I think we're following in the footsteps of our predecessors by, allowing these sorts of leases, and I think they're expected by the groups. But certainly that's something that I don't want to speak for the town manager. I would certainly
never thought
draft
of
a
that.
lease if those were the terms, and they were
Because we're almost
accepted.
devaluing it ourselves, we're kind of like punishing ourselves.
I think you're making a good point, especially now since we're moving over to a market,
Right.
oriented
Yeah.
office thing that we own, office building we own. So it would make more sense.
And it's
Town
not-
hall is just town hall, is a governmental building.
I want to be clear, it's not my idea. Someone asked me that question. Someone asked us that question.
Okay.
So,
All good. I have no problem with it. I think it's, especially since we're now moving to 397, which is a office building we own, as opposed to a governmental building that was mostly governmental usages going on.
The leases in 397 are short, 1 year for all of the people that are over there. The leases in town hall usually went with the,
term.
their term, yeah. So there is that distinction.
So next time we come around, we can certainly.
When did we start doing this? Was it when the 86th district was created? Or was there delegates
was
office there
before that.
before
We
that?
were-
We had the board of supervisors there before that. It doesn't
Board of
matter, I was just
Supervisors
curious.
been in town hall for as long as I
long
can
time.
remember.
But we had
The
our
delegate-
congressman at one point.
The congressman.
Davis
yeah,
was
Tom
there
Davis
for
was in it,
years.
yeah, absolutely, yes, I remember that. You're right.
Okay. Well, certainly something to look at, I never thought of.
Thank you.
Although it would be sad to not be able to threaten to double their rent anymore.
Well,
Prorate.
we're still giving it.
Here's a $2 bill.
Exactly.
I collect those.
Okay. Make sure I'm not getting ahead of myself. Okay, we have a couple, or actually 3 general items. The first one is a resolution to authorize project administration agreements between the town and Fairfax County for the administration of the Ham Sands projects over by Metro Rail. And John Irish is at the table.
Howdy.
Hey,
Good
John.
evening, Mayor, council members. This is a continuation of a agreement that the town has with the county and was authorized by resolution back in, I believe it was April of 17 maybe, where the HTOC area had funding that was identified through the Fairfax County Transportation Priorities Plan. And this is considered part of the Ham Sands project. So previously, the projects that we're looking to get this authorization to sign an agreement was for the concept studies of the basically Van Buren Complete Streets project, and then also for what was at the time known as the cycle track along Herndon Parkway from the W&OD Trail down towards Fairbrook. This is then the next step where we are going to actually be getting the county to give us the construction and design money for those 2 projects. So this is just another almost identical draft agreement that is now just targeting the design and construction as opposed to the feasibility studies that were previously approved.
Questions or comments?
Just one side note, the timing is, this is to go to the Board of Supervisors at their December 2nd, I believe, meeting for approval. So that's why it's
that's to amend chapter 66, street sidewalks in certain other places, I love that, certain other places. To add Article 5, shared mobility devices, also known as scooters. So, I'll turn it over to Lisa Yates.
So I know that many of you have been anxiously awaiting this and aware that we have a deadline by which we need to enact something to avoid having nothing.
Right.
And I believe you had seen, I had sent this out, a draft of this previously. So essentially, as you know, there were changes to state law back earlier this year. There was comprehensive legislation adopted by the General Assembly in the form of House Bill 2752, which made many amendments to Chapter 46.2 of the state code, which relates to vehicles and devices like bicycles, skateboards, mopeds, etc. There were new safety and operational rules that took effect in July that, as a result of the House bill, including that these devices had a limit of 20 miles per hour. They were required to have head and tail lights, and if you were 14 years or younger, you needed parental supervision, as well as some other operational types of regulations. Also, and most importantly, localities were given new authority to regulate certain devices, and this was through 46.2, 13, 15. The devices are bicycles, motorized skateboards, and motorized scooters. So, as I said, 1315 gives us the authority to regulate these devices. We have express authority to either establish pilot programs or both, or regulate scooters and other devices by an ordinance and require a license to operate these within the boundaries of our jurisdiction.
So meaning that like Lime has to get the license, like
Right.
the provider of the device.
Right, the company, the organization that's offering them for hire.
Thank you.
So what is the rush? The rush is, we must enact licensing requirements prior to January 1st, 2020, or devices will be permitted to operate pursuant to state law, which is pretty wide open, and we will have no say over it. There is no way to prevent companies from coming into the town and offering these devices for hire, and their operation will only be subject to state law, which is pretty wide open.
That's gonna change.
Yeah.
Otherwise, as you know, I believe already, the town owns its rights of way, has broad authority to regulate its rights of way. That's why we give franchises to the, companies that were here this evening. That's why we give licenses to individuals who want to use our rights of way for certain activities. So that's what the rush is.
They tried to do the best to take that back.
The proposed ordinance that you have before you this evening defines shared mobility devices to those 4 devices that we mentioned that are for hire. It requires the town council issue a franchise or license agreement to operate in the rights of way before a permit to operate can even be considered to be given to a company. It tasks the town manager or his designee with developing permit operational standards. And most importantly, it preserves the town's authority to regulate these devices by getting this on our books before the end of the year.
Yep.
Potential challenges. Looking forward, there will be some operational issues, street, sidewalk, parking. There's always the potential for accidents that involve automobiles or pedestrians. Increased enforcement demands, enforcement not only of the police, of these that are operating on our roads, but probably more significantly, enforcement that will involve our DPW staff with retrieving these vehicle devices that are left in the rights of way or other places. It does require unknown resources to administer at this point. We are not sure. We're not currently seeing them in town, so we've not had to deal with them on a large scale yet. Issues to be decided include whether or not to allow these devices to operate on sidewalks. If we did not regulate by January 1st, state law does allow them to be operated on sidewalks. Geofencing, I think most people know what that is. It is programming the devices to go slow or to not go in certain zones or to only be allowed to be parked in certain, or left in certain places. That is one way to control some of the issues of keeping them out of certain areas. Speed limits, they can go up to 20 miles per hour by state code, but certain some jurisdictions have allowed them to be operated on the sidewalk, but at no greater than 5 or 6 miles an hour, pretty slow, and have speed limits in other places as well. Operating hours, do we want to limit operating hours, and do we want to require educational and safety messages on the business's app? So just very quickly, I think everyone knows this, but I know some of you tried them out at VML or have tried them other places. E-scooters, one of the shared mobility devices that we were going to be regulating is powered by an electric motor. It's owned by a company, rented to individuals. They can either be dockless or not. Dockless means they can be parked or left anywhere. Scooters are periodically picked up and recharged and redistributed, and they have speeds of up to 20 miles an hour. A company typically places a number of scooters within a jurisdiction, dropping them. The rider downloads the company's app and agrees to their terms and conditions. The rider selects any available scooter, scans it, and pays the fee, and rides. E-scooters on town property are rights of way. The town, as I said, controls our rights of way. Also, unlike counties, we own and control our roads as well. Scooter companies need permission to park scooters, will need permission to park scooters in our public rights of way. If a scooter company deploys scooters without permission, the town can impound the scooters and charge a fee once we adopt the ordinance. Scooters on non-town property. Property owners can decide whether and where to allow scooter parking on their own private property. For instance, shopping centers, apartments, other places can decide that. Without permission, a parked scooter could be removed by the property owner. So, the recommendation from staff is for now to enact the draft ordinance requiring the franchisor license and to be followed with the permit to operate in order to meet the January 1st, 2020 deadline. Later, moving forward, staff gather information to inform further regulation that may be necessary and bring back amendments to the ordinance to council.
Makes sense.
Questions?
Not a one.
Yeah, we have 8 weeks. Sure.
Sheila?
Anybody have any better ideas?
Yeah, I hope you're gonna look at the speed, I mean.
That will have to be something as well. But one thing that's really gonna control that is whether we're gonna allow them on the sidewalks. Sidewalks are
Right.
definitely controlled.
Key on page 8, yeah. Issues to be decided, I mean, to your point. That's like the first thing, maybe for me.
Yeah, and I hope we're getting a lot of input from
This should be a bigger list.
the
That's my
police.
point.
It is, and it's well informed by other surrounding jurisdictions that are far ahead of us where they have been so far. Arlington, Alexandria, Fairfax has a very detailed ordinance, more than we would probably need. And the number of scooters allowed in town, can you drop off 500 or can you drop off 5?
Right.
Hello, Jen. Okay, go on in. Sydney and then Bill.
So my question is, for the purposes of getting stuff done, do you want to enact something very vague and then revisit it? Or vague in the sense that, you know, maybe.
Like a placeholder, so we are in compliance.
We have the right to set up a pilot program and all other things.
This
will be
ordinance
decided.
does all of that.
Okay.
Does all of that. It is bones, I think, to be able to get us through the next couple of months and allow staff to work with the manager to create more substance. All right, sounds good.
Bill?
Yeah, I'm for this only because, again, Dillon rule versus home rule. You look at a place like Hoboken, which can, I mean, they've done a great job with their scooter enactment because it's a home rule state and they can modify it. If we don't take the reins, we'll end up like Baltimore. If you've ever been down to Baltimore, like for an Orioles game, it's like playing dodgeball because you got people on scooters. I mean, you even have people reenacting Titanic 2 at a time on scooters coming at you. So it can be dangerous. So I'd rather have it in our hands so we can control it versus having the state say, well, they can go on streets, they can be 25 miles an hour. We can amend those things to make it to fit our density, you know.
I think it's wise to have a general, broad placeholder so that we're in compliance and then learn from people around us. Does anybody even approach us about having scooters here? And
Best practices.
we don't want to over-regulate and then have to backtrack. I'd
Yep.
rather regulate to solve problems that we're seeing. Other questions or comments?
You know, one of the big things I've seen that larger municipalities have had is the lack of maintenance on these. And these are not commercial vehicles. They were made to have a 2-year lifespan, but when you're using them that frequently, it's almost like if we close our eyes, we're just kind of setting people up to have accidents on these things. And we want it to be a nice multimodal. It would be terrible to have people that don't want to walk because they're going to get run down. Yeah.
Anybody else? Okay. Now, the moment we've all been waiting for, our legislative agenda. We have a revised resolution from the town attorney. We're going to hear from Lisa about what we have here, and then there may be a couple of new suggestions by council that we want to discuss. So, Madam Town Attorney.
Thank you. So I apologize for the number of amendments to the draft program, but as I advised you, VML did not distribute their final hot off the press legislative program until late Friday afternoon. I as well had also been in continuing communication with the county about the action item to amend the state code to allow the county to bill and collect for us our delinquent and non-delinquent real estate taxes, which is a really significant situation that we hope will be successful in the General Assembly. So, a couple of the amendments are simply to change county treasurer to director of tax administration for our first action item, which is an either-or amendment of one section or another of the state code to permit Fairfax County to collect the town's taxes on our behalf. What this allows us to do, and I wish Jenny was here because she knows more about this than I do, maybe Bill, I think one of the most...
She's in school.
That's right. She needs to go to school. One of the most significant things is we will be able to take advantage of some of their collection tools and reap the benefits thereof. We thought we were going to be able to do this last year. We didn't find out that the state code language was not broad enough to include us until it was too late. So as far as I know, only Loudoun, and if we're added, Fairfax would be the only 2 counties in the state that would be allowed to do this. Any questions about that?
Do we know if Fairfax County is going to include that on their legislative agenda?
I don't think they're including it. They actually ask us to, they're discussing it. They may.
Okay.
They're discussing it once you pass it.
Okay.
I was speaking with the county attorney today
Okay.
about it, and
I'm getting ahead of putting the cart in
something that they would not do but for us asking
Right.
for it, yeah.
So this isn't something we can do broadly and just provide a service for other jurisdictions that want to do something similar?
I think we'd be less likely to
If
get
we
it.
could, they probably just wouldn't go there.
Yeah.
That's why I asked if Fairfax is saying, hey, we like this idea too, that's huge.
Yes,
to help
yes, and they
us.
will definitely be, if they don't add it to their legislative, well, they will not add it to their legislative program as a action item. It would be added as a position that they supported. And they do. Okay, so positions and informational items. These are positions based on what the town has indicated in the past that they would like to support, and positions that we have taken, information that I've gleaned from you over the course of the last year, and also reactions that I've had with regard to VML's lengthy position statements. You may ask, some of the new council members may ask, why don't we just adopt all of VML's positions? They are broad, and they may not in every situation reflect the town's position. In some cases, they could be adverse to the town's position with regard to what works for cities doesn't always work for towns. These are a few that, of the most important ones, which VML has also included, and I have included. Additionally, Councilmember Friedrichs made me aware this afternoon of one item that she had previously indicated that she wanted to be included for consideration. I emailed you that language. It was not, there were a couple of typos and other things that need to be fixed in the VML version. And so I did that and forwarded on for your consideration. I apologize that I do not have.
So are we looking to add that as an action
So
item or as a support item?
It would be as a position. If you want to add it, and if you can let me know that before next week, that is the regarding blight and neighborhood preservation.
I can support it.
I just need to know we have a consensus on
Sydney,
that.
did you want to add to that?
I just wanted to say, the reason, Jen and I are on a committee together, an advocacy committee at VML, and this was one of the things that we talked about. I know it doesn't directly address the pines, which is what inspired me to seize upon it. However, I do think that the fact that it says that the town supports strengthening the minimum property maintenance code, and it provides other options that might be useful to us in some cases. I really would like to put this in here because we really don't have much of any control over blight.
Agreed. It's fine to have a broken window.
Yeah.
For those
All right, I
days.
see four heads nodding at least.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Perfect.
Agreed.
Okay, so if that is the only addition, then I will pull draft off of this and finalize it, and draft the actual bill to send to the
Draft the track.
state.
If I could, I would like to throw something out, and I apologize to the manager and attorney, and haven't talked to you since yesterday, but something I hear a lot about, and I think others do too, is wanting to have the authority to limit single-use plastic bags in stores, and that has gone, we've talked about it informally. I don't think it's ever been on a list if you're trying to find it in there. But it's failed many times in the General Assembly, but given the changes that are about to happen, it may get more traction in the upcoming session. So if we're not comfortable throwing it on at the last minute like this, I totally understand, but I would like to at least throw it out there for something going forward that we might want to have at least as a support item, if not an action item in the future.
I thought I saw it.
Herndon Youth Advisory Council.
Is it in there?
I think so.
It is in here, because
I thought
Where
it
is
was,
it?
I
Yeah.
might
Oh.
have, Now that I'm looking at this, it might have come out in the second
it was in the
version,
first
but
one
it was
I
in the
saw.
first version.
Okay.
Because that was the version from last year. And so I wasn't sure where you were on that.
Oh, yes,
so
it is.
It's on page
Page
three, the one I'm
three.
looking at.
4 up from the bottom.
And I think that is, yeah, I think it's fantastic, yes.
I was gonna say, I thought I saw
I
it.
didn't see it.
It's in
Page 3.
It's not in the new one, it's in the
Yeah, I'm
old.
looking at the new one.
Oh,
The revised
I'm
one.
sorry, I'm looking at the old.
Okay, I'm like, I know I didn't see it.
I'm looking at the old one that says revised.
Okay, so if it was, oh wait, no, here it is, you're right.
Is
It's in
it?
there.
I'm not seeing it.
page, yeah.
It's right
Yeah.
above stormwater local assistance.
Oh, local option.
Okay.
I
Never
was
mind.
channeling you and.
I've been sending it out to
It's
people. We're
Wednesday, I
proposing
can't
doing
figure out what
this.
day it is. Okay, never mind then. Clearly it was a decent idea since it's already in here.
It's in
All right,
It's
thanks.
a great idea.
We support it.
Yes.
Awesome.
Okay, so just
That's
the,
good.
just the one item, on the Blight Neighborhood Preservation thing.
Sorry, guys.
Oh,
Sleep at the wheel up here.
Things happen.
But with good plans.
Don't do that last time.
Don't fall asleep on the screen. That is true. All right.
Interesting.
Did anybody else have more comments or questions or anything about the legislative program before we move forward? Okay. Thank you very much. That brings us to roundtable for whoever would like to start. us
I'll
off.
start off.
All right.
I have nothing to report.
All right,
Can I
next.
close then?
Yep.
I also have nothing to report.
Oh, all right. Stakes are high. Who's
Get
next?
them out of the way.
You ready?
I got it.
Nothing?
I have a question, so, good election yesterday, and I met a lot of people there. One concern was, so I wanted to ask the staff also, for Herndon Community Center, you know, the parking, the other side is, you know, you can actually get in from one side and get out from another side. I know for some reason with emergency situation to be used or something, it is, it has, that chain,
For
and it
St.
is
to the
locked.
St. Joe's parking lot.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah, that
exactly.
has come
So,
up.
they were asking, at least for election day, when we have heavy traffic on that side, if it was open, then, you know, they could get in from one side and get out from another side, and it would really manage the cars.
I
and
think
the-
we've tried to talk to the church about that, but
Private
Cindy would know better
property,
than me.
St.
The
Joe's.
church
At
owns
St.
that.
Joe's,
Separation
I
church.
think we've looked at, and someone correct me, but I think we've looked at what the traffic would do, feeding people into there and then trying to get out. I know it's come up.
It is close to Ferndale, I mean, it doesn't have a great deal of distance, but that property is owned by the Diocese of Arlington, the Catholic Diocese of Arlington. And now, for one day, I don't know that we've ever talked to them to allow it for just one day, but, I know there have been discussions in the back. Have you asked?
We've
them?
asked them for occasional, and even we asked about having the bus pick up the Hutchison kids and stop there in their drive and pick them up coming out of our front door and go. They wanted the certificate of insurance, and it's just 5 minutes.
But wouldn't we require that if it was our property? So.
We do require that with
Yeah, so
Rotary.
that
It's
doesn't
our
seem like an
property.
unreasonable
Yeah.
request.
Just to stop and finish driving. But anyway.
That's all that's standing
We have
between us,
asked
maybe
them
we
for-
could do that, could figure it out.
We've asked them
Check a box.
before about being able to open that up and drive through, they were not amenable to it, it doesn't mean you can't go back and ask them.
Yeah, there may be new management, who knows?
Because I saw some
Maybe we
traffic.
They changed
situation
books a
there
few
that
years
could
ago,
have
went
been
from
solved
Benedict to.
if they were able to, you know, get.
Yeah, have we done it under this book?
That's right, Francis seems
Is
to
that
be.
connected to the church or to the school? Or are
Francis
they
is the
one and
first
the same?
Jesuit.
Yeah, but
Is it the church or the school, or is that one and the
In
same?
one
One of the
Yeah, I'm saying.
So I know there's been
It's all
some
owned by
leadership
the
changes in the church and the school, that may not be the decision maker for the.
Right, I think, in the past, I think some of the issues have been, one, at certain times of the day, that's actually quite busy because they don't have bus service, so all the children who go to that school, their parents are carpool or something. And so they have a lot of traffic using that, during certain times, yeah.
Plus, CCTV.
So I think to
And-
Councilmember DeCall's point, it would be for the one day,
Right.
it would be election, and it would almost just be like one way.
One way.
Just people going, because looking at that yesterday, there were people they were colliding basically trying to get it in and out of there. And it's, the later it gets, people get tired, they're not paying attention, and you got people walking across, so any solution would be better than what's there today.
I'll ask them if they'll consider it. The one day for the election day, which you all like, there'd be a couple of other one days we would like, but, okay.
Well,
We'll start with.
baby steps, baby steps.
Okay, who's next? Jen?
I'll just add that, so apologies again for being late. Obviously, I was at the Herndon High School Band concert and presented the proclamation, which they were very appreciative of. Margaret Jamborski showed a 12-minute video that she created to sort of summarize the aspects of the trip, and had shown 3 of the Herndon High School students that presented at Normandy. She had Jim Claremont's speech up there and lots of interviews. The other thing that was really interesting is she got more, with Margaret's help, she was able to get more memorabilia from veterans' families. And so the members of the Historic Society were there. So we had Barbara Glakis, Richard Downer, and Nancy Saunders were there. And she presented them, each of the students came up and had a uniform and a Bible and different things that from the veterans from the USS Herndon. So it's just been an incredible connection between the USS Herndon, the town of Herndon, and the band. So that was sort of solidified again tonight, so that's why I was late.
I'm glad you were able to be there.
Yeah, it was good.
Who else hasn't gone that would like to go?
Okay, I did get to see Margaret give her presentation at the Historical Society meeting, so if anybody gets an opportunity, it's worth seeing. It was really good. I'm looking forward to getting a new one of these. Do you need this? I ran across a couple of these and thought, well, I need to pass this on.
We'll just put a big
Since
X
the
on
glass
it.
is no longer there, we gotta get new stuff for the
New food
citizens.
pyramid.
Or,
Purple
have
container.
a spot to push people on. And if you haven't watched the video of what Fairfax County is doing with the glass, it's really cool. I put it up, but if you didn't pursue the way it was on the Fairfax County website, you really have to go down and click about 3 different things to get it going. But they're actually getting funding for that, which I thought other people's money is awesome. And then I brought some of these Share the Roads. So I'm gonna put them out there so people can pick them up when they come to meetings. And if anybody wants one. That's it.
Thank you. Well, I just want to say thank you for how quickly that purple dumpster showed up over there. To whoever made that happen, thank you. Someone did ask me that lives over in Kingstream if people who don't live in the town are allowed to use it, and I said, yes, of course, it's a county,
We're checking IDs.
I know, that's what I said, I don't think we're gonna check IDs there, but it's a county facility that we are facilitating, so anyone can use it. Mr. Town Manager, I almost forgot you. Anybody think of something?
I did, actually. I'm always thinking of
That's why I asked.
somebody who came up with who was very upset about the glass thing, came up to me and asked me if I would help her with a styrofoam, an anti-styrofoam project, which, so the 2 of us are doing this not as part of any government thing, but we're reaching out to the Chamber of Commerce and delivery services. So look forward to sharing that with you all later.
Cool. All right, well, we do have a need to go into a closed meeting pursuant to section 2.23711A1 for discussion of prospective candidates relative to appointments to boards and commissions, and to consider the disposition of publicly held real estate where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiation strategy of the public body. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
We move in
All right,
second.
Bill and Siggy. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And those opposed?
No.
All
Wait
right,
a minute,
Siggy.
you have to go against your own.
No, no. All right, so we are going to take a very quick break and come back in about 5 minutes to knock this out.